I'm laying out my instrument panel, and I've got a piece of cardstock here of poster board that I'm kind of laying it out on. I took the piece of 6061 60 thousandths aluminum that I got for the instrument panel, and I cleaned it up real good, and then I put masking tape over it to use to help protect the surface of it while I'm working, and is used as a drawing surface on it. And then some time back, last spring, I had made this template for the instrument panel. This is just out of a piece of 1/8 inch plywood, and it's made to give me the general shape of the instrument panel. It fits in the airplane, and I kind of laid out a pattern on it. I was going to use it for the pattern, but decided to go ahead and draw the pattern out on this cardboard instead. I might be changing things as it goes. This is the Cub Crafters panel that was in the airplane, and you can see it's too small to use in there. I used it as a rough guide on how to lay this one out. This one is laid out the same dimension height-wise up and down, and I used a similar pattern for it on the edge here. And the top, the slopes on here, this is sloped quite a bit more than the Cub Crafters one. It has a lot sharper slope on the sides here than this one does, but I've got plenty of room on this wider panel to do what I need to do in it, and I figured that having the more slope on here would make the bending of the boot cowl, the glare shield, a lot easier. There's not near as much of a bend in that as there is in the Cub Crafters one. Anyway, I'm getting this laid out, this is what I've got so far. I made kind of a false start here on the radios. I was kind of thinking of making a tray for both radios that could slide in and out of the instrument panel, so it'd be easier to work on the back of them when I needed to. But after I got to thinking about it, I decided I didn't need to do that. I've got two radios that are going in. One of them, of course, is the Garmin, what is that, 250, Garmin 250 XL that came with the airplane. It's a GPS comm. And then the other radio that I've got to put in there is this ICOM. It's set up for marine frequencies and commercial frequencies, so used for emergency for the Forest Service and other commercial entities that have remote sites around here. I was originally going to set this up with the VHF radio on top because it's got all these cooling fins on top, and I wanted the airspace above it, and it's also narrower, and I could have fit everything closer to the side. This is only 5.5 inches wide, and the aircraft radio is 6.25 inches wide. So I was going to set them up in a tray like this, but I changed my mind and decided to go ahead and put the comm radio on top and the marine radio on the bottom. And one of the reasons for that is there's this adapter that goes with the marine radio to adapt it to use in the aircraft systems. Most commercial non-aircraft radios, the audio output is 8 ohms, and that's not compatible with the aircraft systems. It'll overdrive. Aircraft systems are 500-600 ohms of impedance on the speakers and stuff. So, and there's also more current on the output of the audio system than there is in an aircraft system, what they're designed for. So if you just plug this directly into the aircraft system, it'll just overdrive all the aircraft stuff. And then commercial, most radios use a bias voltage on the mic circuit, and it's a different impedance and stuff too. So this box adapts so that you can use the aircraft system with this radio. This has to go in there. They've got to be fairly close to this radio. So I'm going to put this radio on the bottom, and then I'll mount this adapter underneath that. Instead of being it stacked tight like you'd normally have an aircraft stack, I'm going to leave an inch of space between the bottom of the aircraft radio and this radio, so there's plenty of airflow around there for the heat dissipation. Although we don't transmit with this very often, so it's not really going to generate much heat. Mostly it's just to receive We listen to the boat traffic and other traffic around with it, and it's kind of, for in case of emergency, you're a lot more likely to get a response on the marine channel in this country than you are on an aircraft channel if you have an emergency. This is going to be the layout then for the radios, and then laying out the pattern for the instruments, and trying to figure out how to get sizes and stuff for the instruments. I did an internet search on it, and 99% of the internet searches says just go to Aircraft Spruce or some other company and buy their jig to put on there to drill it out, and buy the punches and do hole saws, this, that, and the other thing. By doing a search for aircraft instrument hole patterns or hole cutouts, I was able to find 2 sites that did have information on the hole cutouts. And this one, well, it didn't put down on there what whose that is. I think it's Mike something or whatever, but this came up on there, and he had this page with the dimensions and stuff for different hole cutouts for different instruments. You got 1.25" type instruments, and 2 1/4" instruments, and the 3 1/8" the standard instruments, and then there's one for the altimeter, standard instrument, rate of climb, and altimeter. The problem with that one is it's not to scale. It gives you the dimensions you need to draw out the holes, but it's not really to scale. But I did find this one here, Craggy Arrow, and it's a PDF, and it actually has the instrument templates on there. And the first time I printed this out using the standard printer default settings, these patterns came out the wrong size. They were too small. But by adjusting the settings on the printer or the print, I printed it out with no margins or anything, and it came out. This is the exact size of the cutout. So a person could just cut this out and paste it on and use it for a template. But it gives a good instructions in here to how to lay this out for a 3 1/8" hole. Draw a 3 1/4" square, describe the diagonal lines between it, and then draw a 3 1/2" circle using the center point of these diagonals, and where the 3 1/2" circle crosses the diagonals is where the screw holes go. And then you draw a 3 1/4", or that's 3 1/8", yeah, 3 1/8" hole diameter circle on the inside of that, and then that's the cutout. So a person could cut this out and paste it right on, but given these instructions here, I was able to lay everything out real nice on there. And it does the same thing for the 2 1/4" holes. I measured down a 1/2 inch from the top, which is matches what this old panel, Cub Crafters panel was, and then I drew a straight line along there, the top of the panel, and I measured down 2 3/8 inches down, and drew another line parallel to that one, and then drew boxes in there. So all of these will wind up being straight and level and flat across. Now, it doesn't really make a whole lot of difference except for aesthetics on whether they're straight or anything, except for the turn coordinator. And if it's not perfectly straight, then the inclinometer on the bottom of it is always going to be part of a bubble off, and your turn coordinator will always be off just a little bit. So this is my tentative pattern. I want to put everything I can over here on the right side. Now this is a tandem seat airplane. On a wider body airplane where you have 2 seats parallel, you want to make sure you have your flight instruments and the main instruments right in front of the pilot, and you can have the other ones off to one side, off over in front of the co-pilot or passenger side or whatever. But since this is a tandem seat airplane and the pilot is sitting on the center line of the airplane, and the center line of the instrument panel is lined up with his center line, it doesn't really matter where this stuff goes. Everything is going to be in front of the pilot anyway. But I don't fly instruments. Everything I do is VFR, and I very seldom use any of these instruments anyway. I might check the altimeter once in a while, the VSI once in a while. The airspeed indicator I'll look at more frequently. Turn coordinator, I use it once in a while, but not very often. The tachometer, I use it more for setting the aircraft, but almost all of this stuff I use outside visual clues and seat of the pants to figure it out. So this is just references for me, and so it doesn't really matter where they are in front of me. Nothing is critical on here, and there's nothing that I can't adapt to. So my idea on here as for to lay this stuff out was to try to keep everything that is electrical, the turn coordinator, the radios, amp meter, CHT and EGT, off to the side over here to keep them as far away from the magnetic compass as possible. Now put the magnetic compass over here as far away from anything that has a magnetic flow around it, any place that current's flowing, and get it as far away from that as possible to try to keep the magnetic compass as accurate as it can. I haven't flown a tube, steel tube airplane yet where the compass was anywhere close to being accurate, but hopefully by keeping this away from all the electrical stuff, I'll be able to keep it more accurate. I had different options on cutting the holes. I could lay this all out as a computer program and send it to the school and have them cut it out on the computer controlled router table that they have. Use hole saw. I don't like the way hole saws cut holes generally. Might be able to make one that cuts holes and might have something to play with. I do have a hole cutter that I might be able to use for this, sharpen the bit up on it. I was thinking about having them take two of these patterns here, making a template out of aluminum that I could use then and just screw down on each one of these holes and use it for a pattern for the router and cut them out with the router. I think I got my instrument panel laid out the way it's going to be, and I changed the design of it a couple of three times. And I was going to mount the comm radio up there, and a couple inches below the aircraft radio, like I said, the marine radio. I decided to go ahead and leave the space in there, and I'll build a radio rack that I can put the transponder into if I ever decide to put it back in the airplane. I went ahead and left space for that, dropped the marine radio down farther, and we'll mount it in there. I moved the position of some of the switches a little bit from what the original was. I put the master switch over and the mags over, kind of in a line underneath each other. I went ahead and extended the panel down 1.5 inches. The reason I did that, the original panel, it's set up to mount a panel that just mounts underneath the instrument panel with all the circuit breakers on. And Cub crafters, when they build it and they put all the other crap in there, the other radios and stuff, they can just extend this circuit breaker panel out as far as they want to. But I decided to go ahead and just include that into this instrument panel. There's no problem with clearance for legs or anything underneath, and this thing already stuck down that far. And then I also had the marine radio mounted here underneath the center, and I had plenty of clearance there for everything, so there's not really a problem for clearance. So I went ahead and dropped that down a little bit, and I can mount all of the circuit breakers and switches all on the panel without having any extraneous added on parts. I ordered a new EGT. I've got a combination EGT CHT, so I can reduce the panel up here by 1. I would have liked to got a combination oil pressure and oil temperature, but they didn't have any TSO'd. They got them for experimental, but none for certified airplanes. Everything else is pretty much the way it was. I'll be able to put, I think I'll put my headset and mic jacks here in the panel so they're down instead of up on a wing root panel. They just kind of get in the way there. I like them better down here. I took this cardboard template that I made, and all of the cutouts on it are marked in the red. Now I had so many different marks on there and stuff, I was losing track of which ones were the changes and which ones were going to be the cutouts. Everything's all set up now to cut out. We can take this to the bandsaw, make the rough cuts on it, smooth it all out, then cut out for all of the instrument holes. There might be some changes on some of these small ones, but I think I've got them pretty much laid out where I want. The only thing I don't have laid out right now is the panel for the intercom. Everything else is pretty much laid out. I'm pretty happy with the way it looks there.